Good coffee. In a Santa mug. Let us see. Let us see. Is this coming through loud and clear? I think we're live. Seems to be working on my end. Just let me make sure it is coming through loud and clear. There we go. All right, I think we are running. Welcome to the Total Fitness Bodybuilding video chat for Friday, December 23rd. All right, getting very close to Christmas. Everybody's excited, looking forward to Christmas. I know my little fella is. Right? Harvey is super excited for Christmas. Merry Christmas, my friends. Hopefully this is coming through loud and clear, and I believe it is. Let's see. Dan is joining in. Merry Christmas. AJ is joining in. So the word you weren't going to show up since it's close to Christmas. It is close to Christmas, but this will be a Lee's Holiday Christmas special. Loud and clear. Good stuff. Loud and clear. Thank you, folks. Everyone, the regulars all know the rigmarole. I always ask if it's coming through loud and clear, and it is coming through loud and clear. Thank you so much. Appreciate. All right. So first off, welcome to the video chat. This is something that I do pretty much every Friday, or I try to anyway. I mean, I'm not perfect. There's some Fridays that I miss, but I try to do a live video chat every Friday as kind of a way to clue up the week and have a chance to connect and answer some questions and just kind of shoot the breeze when it comes to helping to strategize some action steps when it comes to reaching your fitness and fat loss goals and muscle building goals and whatever it is that you happen to be striving to achieve. So the way these chats work is I'm going to be hanging out here for the next hour-ish, right? I don't have a set timeline. This is my timeline, right? I've got myself a nice piping hot cup of coffee in a Santa Claus mug, or a bottom half of Santa Claus mug. And by the time that coffee's gone, the video chat's over. So it's going to take an hour-ish. So that's my timeline right there, right? Very, very scientific time calculator I have. And the way it works is I'm going to be hanging out, answering questions that you have and topics of discussion related to fitness and nutrition, any specific challenges that you have when it comes to your workouts, your eating plan, when it comes to building muscle, losing fat. Feel free to type those questions or topics of discussion into our chat window there, and I'll do the best that I can to help you out during our chat. And again, we are streaming on 3 different locations here through this live stream. We are streaming through YouTube as usual. We're also streaming through the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Facebook page, as well as my own personal profile page as well. So wherever you happen to be tuning into, welcome, and feel free to chime into our chat today. So let me know who's tuning in today. Let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from. Let's see. And what's the weather like in your neck of the woods? Is it going to be a green Christmas for you or a white one? Unfortunately, it's looking like it's going to be a green one for us. I'm in Newfoundland on the East Coast, and we haven't had much snow on the East Coast. We've been having the temperature's been right around the freezing mark. So some days it's above freezing, some days it's below freezing, but every little bit of snow that we've gotten, it's always warmed up afterwards and it's melted. So there's a little tiny bit of snow on the ground now, like a dusting of snow, but it's going to warm up and rain tomorrow. So there goes our white Christmas, or any chance of a white Christmas. So we're going to be having a green one, but that's fine. Right? I'm cool either way. But let me know, do you guys have a white Christmas coming up, or is it going to be a green one? Let's see. All right, we have current news is in India. I'm assuming that's not going to be a white Christmas there. Do you even celebrate Christmas? Right? I mean, obviously I know we got people from all over the world, so not everybody's probably celebrating Christmas, even though I'm sure the majority of people who probably tune in these video chats do celebrate Christmas. All right, so let's see. Is there any questions, comments, feedback? Feel free to type those in. I'll just give you a moment there to gather your thoughts and post your questions. I do see some comments in that rolling through right there. You have MPAS saying, California, no such thing as a white Christmas in the Valley. No, I'm pretty sure there's not. Yeah. All right, here we go. And what do we have there? Lisa's saying, in New Hampshire, maybe a dusting of snow. Yeah, maybe. All right, enough to provide something for Santa's sleigh to run on. All right, just a little bit of a so he's not scraping against the dry ground. A little bit of snow for make the ride smoother. All right. So this is a challenging time. And something I'm going to share with you now is uh, this will be a very practical strategy for those of you who are going to be attending Christmas parties or a Christmas family dinner. And this was something I was actually chatting with my personal coaching students over on the Muscle After 40 Blueprint program. We were chatting about this week, strategies for dealing with Christmas. And I just want to reshare some of those with you here, because this is going to be applicable for everybody who's going to be attending a Christmas dinner. And there's ways to go about it where you can actually enjoy the get together, enjoy the experience, and not leave feeling like you've blown your diet and you're totally off the rails, right? It's not good, bad, black or white, one all or nothing or anything like that. There's a continuum in the middle, and there's ways to make better choices where you can still enjoy the experience and make progress at the same time. And this is the secret to sustainability when it comes to fitness and fat loss, because a lot of people approach it from this all or nothing approach, right? It's either I'm all in, it has to be perfect, extreme hardcore cutting, or there's, eat whatever the hell I want, right? There's no in between. And mastering that in between, mastering that continuum, and learning how to dial it up or dial it back is the secret to sustainability and success over the long term with this. So first off, like when you look at a holiday meal, whether I'm going to use Christmas as a prime example, but this could apply to any get together, whether it's a birthday, whether it's a vacation or a celebration, or whatever you have coming up. Like when you're getting together with family and friends over food and drink, the big thing is look at like what's most important, right? Is it actually the food, or is it the experience and the social gathering, spending time with loved ones, friends and family and all that kind of stuff? Chances are that's the primary focus. That's number one. The food and the drink, that's a nice perk, right? It's nice to have that to go along with it, but that doesn't have to take away from the experience, or it doesn't have to take away from your fitness goals in the process of enjoying the experience, right? There's a way to moderate it. And these are some strategies that I like to use when I'm going to a Christmas dinner. And I find that it's very helpful for enjoying the experience and not feeling bloated and guilty and totally derailing yourself in the process. First off, whenever we have a get together, usually, in our family, when we arrive at the host house who's having the get together, there's a lot of appetizers scattered around, right? They might have, in the living room, the table is filled with some appetizers, and you go into the kitchen, there's going to be appetizers. And these are very often just mindless, snacky stuff. Like it could be obviously Christmas candies and, the chocolates, and it might be a bowl of potato chips there. There could be like cheese and crackers and little odds and ends, but it's empty calorie, mindless, snacky food. And it's something that I don't really enjoy. Like, I mean, it's there. And if you start eating it, it's just going to like empty filler food, right? It's not going to add to the experience of the get together. So a lot of that mindless stuff, the crackers and the chips and the box of chocolates and all that, if you can avoid that initially, or at least minimize it, that's going to go a long way to reducing the empty calories that you consume during a holiday get together. Another big one that we need to address as well is the topic of adult beverages, because there's a lot of people celebrate with adult beverages, alcoholic beverages. And if you can choose non-alcoholic options, that's obviously going to be a big step in the right direction. I personally don't drink alcohol. I haven't for years. I remember the last time I drank alcohol was in 2011. And the reason I remember that is because I was actually getting ready for our provincial bodybuilding championships back in 2011. And during my pre-contest prep for that, I stopped drinking alcohol. And after the contest was over, I said, you know what? I went several months without drinking alcohol. I don't really miss it. It's something that I don't really want or crave. And I just haven't drank it since. I mean, not that I had a problem with alcohol, but I used to drink to fit in socially, especially in social gatherings, Christmas and holidays and get-togethers and whatever. If somebody offered me a drink, I felt like I had to accept it to kind of just be nice and fit in with the crowd. So I used to drink alcohol for that reason alone. Like I rarely ever bought it to have in my own house, but when we went out somewhere, I would drink it. But in that year, it was 2011, I remember I stopped drinking as part of my pre-contest prep. And after the contest was over, I just never picked it up. So it's something it's not an issue for me anymore. But for those of you who alcohol is an issue, then there's ways to minimize the damage done and still enjoy it. One thing that I used to do back when I did drink socially was, if I did have an alcoholic drink, I would have an alcoholic drink, whatever it was, a beer or a drink or something. And then I would usually follow it up with a non-alcoholic one, maybe a sparkling water or non-alcoholic beer or a diet soda, something like that. And then I'd usually follow that up with a glass of water before then having another alcoholic drink. So only one out of every 3 drinks actually contained alcohol. So this way I could literally have a glass in my hand and socialize and be part of the group and everything else and enjoy the experience and not have people pestering me to say, hey, let me get you a drink, because I always had a glass in my hand. And I could enjoy the experience, but only one out of 3 drinks actually contained alcohol. So if I had 6 drinks over the night, 2 of them were alcoholic drinks. So it's a great way to kind of minimize the damage and minimize the alcohol consumed. And these days, I still use that same strategy, except none of the drinks that I consume are alcoholic drinks. So if I go somewhere, I'm probably drinking sparkling water. I'm probably drinking a diet soda. Or if I do have a drink, it's usually a non-alcoholic beer. I mean, and if you pour up your non-alcoholic beer in a frosty mug, nobody knows the difference. As far as everyone's concerned, you're having a beer, right? You're enjoying your Christmas cheer with everybody else. So I still employ that strategy, because I find as long as you got a glass in your hand when you're at a social gathering, it prevents people from trying to offer you a drink. Or if they do offer you a drink, you say, hey, I'm good. Hold up your glass and you can say, yeah, I'm good. And then everyone's happy, because it's just the nature of the holidays and stuff. When the nature of a get together, people always want to, they want you to drink with them. So I'm still drinking with them. It's just I'm choosing to drink non-alcoholic beverages instead. And you can still enjoy yourself without the alcohol, right? It's just a crutch, really. So, I find I don't need it to have fun and enjoy myself, and, I can still fit in. And that's a great way to minimize the damage to your health and minimize, empty calories consumed and things that are going to hinder your fat burning process. When it comes to the actual meal itself, like you're having your Christmas dinner, what I always do is I scan the food. Like, very often when we have a big family get together, it's usually something like almost like a potluck buffet type of setup, right? Where there's a lot of different things available. And I always scan the menu, so to speak, and see what are the foods that I really want to enjoy, want to try and have, and what are those foods that I really don't care for. Because if you just go to the buffet, if you will, and this can apply if you're at an all-you-can-eat buffet as well, like a lot of people just start at one end and they take a scoop of everything. They're going to take a helping of everything that's on the buffet, like one right after the other. Where a smarter way to go about it is to actually just do a walk, do a lap, do a lap of the food first, and decide in advance, hey, that looks good. I'm going to try some of that. I can take it or leave it. This doesn't really appeal to me. Oh, this over there looks good, and kind of decide in advance the particular foods that you want. And this way, you can load up your plate with better choices, even if some of them are not the best in terms of healthy choices. It's foods that you actually going to enjoy, and eat that versus just mindlessly eating some filler food because it's there, right? Like, don't feel like you have to eat it simply because it is there, right? You choose the foods that you want. And if you are going to enjoy something, then make sure that you're actually enjoying it. You're getting some pleasure from it. So that's a strategy I use. I always scan the food first and purposely choose what it is that I'm going to have, and not just have a bit of everything, because a bit of everything can usually lead to overeating. I'd rather be much more selective and enjoy the foods that I'm eating. And the big thing is, when you do eat the food, slow down and savor it. Like, take your time and enjoy it. Don't just woof it in you like a conveyor belt, right? Fork to the plate to the mouth, and it's just this nonstop shovel, right? Like, slow down, put that fork down in between bites, have a sip of water and enjoy some conversation and just the experience of eating the meal, and savor it, enjoy it, chew your food and savor it, taste it. Don't just shovel it in. And this is a great way to get more time under taste. So when you're eating out and eating in a family dinner or wherever, you can still get the same eating satisfaction if you just slow down and savor your food more. And this is a great way to enjoy it and minimize the damage done from consuming excess calories. And that's a strategy you can use all the time. Like if you didn't change your eating habits one little bit, but you just slowed down and purposely chewed your food more, savored it more, enjoyed every bite of food without just shoveling it in, that alone would have a massive impact. You know, you think if you just made that one change in 2023, you did nothing else, but you made that one change, you would consume less calories, you would have better digestion, and you would actually see progress just from that one change alone. Even if you didn't count a calorie, track a macro or anything, you just slowed down. Because when you slow down, not only do you enjoy the food more, and it helps your body to release those natural digestive enzymes that you get when you're chewing your food so that you break it down and absorb it and digest it better, but it also gives your belly and brain time to link up that you're full, because it takes 20 minutes from when the food hits your belly to the time it sends the signal to your brain that you're full. There's a 20-minute lag time. So if you're eating fast, you can tuck away a lot of food in 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden it hits you like a ton of bricks. And then it's like, whoa, I'm stuffed, right? You're overstuffed at that stage. Whereas if you take your time and you savor and enjoy the meal and pace yourself, you'll get to that satiation state with much less food in your system, and you'll feel better afterwards. Instead of feeling like you're fat and bloated and you got to lie down on the couch and sleep it off, you'll actually feel comfortably full, right? And satiated afterwards. So slowing down, huge strategy. And another one that I find is helpful as well, use this same principle when it comes to the desserts. Because of course, with Christmas dinner, there's always going to be some desserts. And choose the desserts that you want to have in advance and decide, you know what, I'm going to have a piece of that Christmas cake that, you know, Aunt Gertrude made that looks delicious, or I'm going to have one of those Christmas cookies, or I'm going to have whatever. Like decide in advance what you're going to have. And again, slow down, savor it and enjoy it, and don't just wolf it down. Sometimes when people are eating their cheap foods, their bad foods, you know, the desserts and the cookies, they almost feel guilty about eating it, and they want to like wolf it down and get it in them as fast as possible. Almost like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. And you shovel it in as fast as you can, almost like hope nobody notices while I'm eating this or doesn't notice how much I'm eating. Slow down, enjoy it, savor it. Like it's okay to enjoy it, but just savor it. And then that will also help to minimize the consumption, because you're getting more time under taste, right? You're slowing down and you're enjoying the meal. And the big one is, after you've enjoyed your Christmas dinner and everything else, get back on track for your very next meal afterwards, or the very minimum, get back on track the next day. Try not to let this spiral out of control and say, oh, all right, I ate too much over Christmas. Well, screw it. I'm going to wait till the new year. And then instead of just having one day or one meal where you overindulge, now you're going to have a week of overindulgence. And I mean, the difference between one meal versus 1 week is huge, right? Like one meal is very easy to recover from and get back on track. In fact, you'd hardly even notice that there was a setback at all. But if you had a full week of overindulging, that's going to set you back, right? So don't let it spiral out of control, right? Enjoy your meal and then get back on track for the very next meal, or the minimum the very next day. Try not to let it spiral out of control. And if you go about that, then you can certainly have your cake and eat it too, so to speak, when it comes to your Christmas dinner. And this is a strategy, I teach my Muscle After 40 coaching students, and we apply this throughout the year. Like when we're eating out in restaurants or family dinners or on vacation, these strategies are powerful because it allows you to enjoy the moment, enjoy the experience without feeling like you're on a diet, but it also minimizes the damage done. And it's how you control those situations where most people just say, screw it, F it, I'm going to eat whatever the hell I want, I don't care. That's where you can really create a lot of, setback. But if you can minimize the damage in those areas, that's going to lead to faster progress over the long term. So hopefully that was helpful. And if you do have any questions or comments about that, feel free to share them in the chat window there. And with that being said, I'm going to jump into our chat window and see what kind of questions and topics are coming through from your end. I'll have myself a sip of Santa coffee. All right, let's see. We have John's a regular to our video chats. He says, Happy Christmas. What's the best time to diet to get What's the best time to diet, get lean, Happy New Year, even though I'm drunk, count calories and wine too? But by the sounds of that question, I think you're into the wine. All right, so John's enjoying some Christmas cheer. What's the best time to diet to get lean? And he says, I'm drunk and I count the calories in the wine. All right. First of all, I don't like to use the word diet because diet has that short-term mentality, that short-term mindset. I don't diet at all. For most people, I don't recommend dieting unless it's something short-term. Like if a bodybuilder who's getting ready for a competition, yeah, you can go on a pre-contest diet because it's a short-term thing. You know, an athlete who's trying to make weight for a sporting event, yeah, that's a diet, right? That's a short-term thing. Someone who's getting ready for a photo shoot, a movie actor who's getting ready for a movie role, something that's short-term where, okay, I'm going to suffer it out in the short term, achieve a temporary result, and then I'm going to dial it back down to somewhat of a maintenance program afterwards. You know, anything that's short-term is when you can diet. But if you're trying to achieve a lasting, sustainable fitness and fat loss transformation, you want to kind of like stop thinking of dieting and focus on better choices all around. And what I just shared earlier, you know, the strategies for dealing with Christmas holidays, those are the types of real world strategies that you can apply all the time. So it's not like when's the best time to diet. It's like, no, we just make better choices most of the time, right? We're making better choices and we're focusing on being good enough, but good enough consistently over the long term. And when you do that, then it's not a diet. It's just you're slowly moving in the right direction. It's just this continuously trying to put one foot in front of the other and make this slow progress. And there's no deadline. It's not like, hey, I'm going on a diet for the next 6 weeks, or I'm going on a diet for whatever. It's like, no, I'm going to make better food choices. And, you know, there is no start, there is no end date. It's just a process, a lifestyle. Should we run on a treadmill along with running shoes? Is this safe for our knees? Should we run on a treadmill with running shoes? Yeah, I wouldn't run on a treadmill without shoes. I guess that's your question. Should you run with shoes or barefoot? No, I would wear shoes. I know there is a school of thought out there for barefoot running, and maybe if you have somewhere where you can do it comfortably and safely, like, you know, I know like some people like to run barefoot on the beach in the sand or something like that, you know, or somewhere like that. Yeah, I mean, maybe you could do some barefoot running, but from a practical point of view, for anybody who's going to do any substantial amount of running, get yourself a darn good pair of running shoes. Like that's critical. In fact, everybody that I know who's a serious runner has good running shoes. They invest in their footwear. Like that's somewhere where you don't want to skimp out and just get the cheapest, crappiest shoes or whatever. Like you want a good pair of running shoes because that's going to help to support your ankles, provide that, you know, the cushioning and everything else that you need. So yeah, don't skimp out on that. As far as safety for the knees, that really depends on the individual. Some people can run and have no knee trouble at all. Some people can't. And it really depends on your body type. Your body size is a big one as well. Generally speaking, smaller framed, lighter people are better runners. Heavier set people, you're probably going to be better off doing some sort of non-impact form of cardio. So in my case, I'm not a runner. I don't like running, and I find it's very hard on my joints, you know, my knees, my ankles, shins, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm not built to be a runner, but I do love other forms of cardio, like lower impact cardio, like cycling. I find that that's something that I can do, and I, you know, pretty decent at it. I mean, I'm not a world-class cyclist by any stretch, but I mean, I'm decent at it, and I do a lot of it. And I find that that's a form of cardio that I can do and enjoy, and it's easier on the body. So I'm still getting the cardiovascular benefits, but I'm not beating myself up from the impact of running. And I find that anybody who's bigger, and when I say bigger, like 200 pounds or above, I consider, like by endurance standards, that's big. I know by North American standards, 200 pounds is not big, right? You know, some people consider, hey, you're skinny if you're down around 200 pounds, but in the endurance world, like 200 pounds is big, right? So, I mean, people who are that weight, that's a lot of weight to be carrying when you're running. And the thing you got to realize with running, every time you take a stride, I think it's 6 times your body weight is the impact force every time you take a stride, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of jarring on the joints, right? When you're doing that impact. So if you find it hard on the knees, then choose non-impact forms. Again, cycling, swimming, cardio machines at the gym, right? I mean, there's all kinds of different options available. You don't have to run. Right? If you don't like running, don't run. But if you do like running and you can do it consistently, then hey, by all means, go for it. Moving on, AJ is joining in. How important do you think it is to just take it easy during the holiday period and not get overly consumed about the amount of food one eats? I think it's best not to focus too much on weightlifting. This is really a personal preference. I still enjoy working out over the holidays, but the way I would recommend this, and I'm going to just close your comment there because it's blocking half my face here. The way I like to focus on this is look at it like a thermostat, like a dial. Like you can dial it up or you can dial it back. And if you feel like, okay, the holidays, you want to spend more time with your family, you want to kind of dial it back a little bit, then it's okay. Yeah, dial it back a little bit. But it doesn't mean this all or nothing, right? Like you want to eliminate that thinking entirely from your mindset if possible. And just think of like a continuum. Right? If you're pushing yourself towards a goal and you really want to, make strides and progress with your fitness, then yeah, you're going to have to dial it up. But then when you're into maintenance mode, right? You're over the holidays and stuff, you want to think of a maintenance mode, then yeah, dial it back a little bit. So instead of working out 4 days a week, maybe you're going to work out 2 days a week. Instead of being super strict with your counting calories and macros, maybe you're just going to, have some free choice meals, meaning like you're not going to stress over the counting. Still focus on making better food choices most of the time, filling up on the protein and the vegetables and all that kind of stuff. But then if you do desire to have some food, like holiday meal foods, whether with, the turkey and the gravy and the mashed potatoes and the pumpkin, or not pumpkin pie. Well, it might have pumpkin pie. I don't know. Christmas fruit cake or plum pudding, whatever you fancy or whatever your family makes. Like if you want to have some of that, then sure, have some of it, but do so in moderation and don't stress over it. Like that's one thing. I think when you add stress to it and you feel guilty about it, that just makes the problem even worse. Like if you're going to have a holiday meal and you are going to have some dessert or whatever, some fattening foods, well, enjoy them. Like don't eat them and then feel bad about eating them. Like that just there's no pleasure at all because you're eating it, but then you feel guilty about it. And then it's just like this, you just feel yucky inside. Whereas if you are going to eat it, at least enjoy it, savor it, enjoy it, and get the most bang for your buck from it. And then get back on track afterwards, right? Like I don't want you to feel guilty about food, right? Like this is something that I've really, within when I'm working with my coaching students, I really try and emphasize this is there's no food that's off limits. Like when I'm coaching people for sustainable fitness and fat loss. Now, if we're training for something specific, like, someone's getting ready for a bodybuilding show, that's different. But for general fitness and fat loss and overall health and wellness, I want you to have this open mindset where there's no food off limits. Like if you're craving a cookie, then eat a darn cookie. Like don't put it off. If you're craving some ice cream, then have some ice cream. And the reason why I encourage that is because let's just put it in perspective, right? And think of like traditional diets versus sustainable eating. In a traditional diet, you go to Coach Hardass who's yelling at you and saying, you got to count your calories, got to count your macros, and you're not allowed to eat this, and you're not allowed to eat that, and you got to keep your carbs low, and and if you don't do it, then you're a pussy, and whatever. And they're beating you up for not sticking to your program, like a drill sergeant, like in the Army, right? You're yelling at you and trying to force you to make a change, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, that approach works in the short term, right? Most of the extreme transformations you see, like these extreme before and after transformations, it's usually done through some hardcore extreme deprivation, suffer it out type of approach. And that's like a double-edged sword, because yeah, in the short term that produces amazing results, but long term it ultimately backfires, because nobody can suffer it out for the rest of their life. Everybody has their level or their threshold of how much crap they can take before they say, screw it, F it, I don't want to do this anymore. And then they go off the deep end and, go back to their old habits, right? That happens to everybody. I mean, I used to do it when I was competing in bodybuilding. Yeah, I could muster up extreme willpower for several months, but as soon as that contest was over, it was like, okay, I'm going back to the old eating habits, right? I'm going, where's the all-you-can-eat buffet? Where's the pizza place? Where's the ice cream shop? And just go back to all that crap again. So you need to think of it from a sustainability point of view. And when it comes to like your not so good foods, the foods that you're craving and the foods that you're traditionally not allowed to eat when you're dieting, let's say cookies and ice cream or slice of pizza, whatever. If you're craving it, have some, but have it in moderation and realize that there's no limit to it. And what I mean by no limit to it is if you put restrictions on it, whereas I say, you're not allowed to eat pizza, all of a sudden that makes you want pizza even more. Or if I say you're not allowed to eat cookies, never again, you're not allowed to eat cookies, right? You're on a diet, you're not allowed to eat them. That makes you want cookies even more. So by saying you're not allowed to have something actually makes you want it more. Whereas if you can have it whenever you want, subconsciously you want it less, because it doesn't feel scarce anymore. It doesn't have that scarcity mindset around it. It's something that, if I want it, I can have it. No big deal. And you have that just a carefree attitude towards it, because it's there in abundance. Like if you want it, it's there. And then when you do have it, like have that cookie, have that ice cream, or have whatever, enjoy it, savor it, take your time, eat it. And then, once you've enjoyed it, very often the craving subsides. And then it's like, okay, I had it, I enjoyed it, but now I can forget about it and move on and just get back on track again. Whereas if you constantly avoid it and you constantly say, I'm not allowed to have it, not allowed to have it, right? You're craving cookies. No, not allowed to have it, not allowed to have it. You keep putting that off. Then that craving builds and it builds and it builds, and you start to obsess over it. And then eventually, once it builds to a certain level, it's just like, screw it, I can't take it anymore. Once you have that moment of weakness, then you're going to like binge and go off the rails. And instead of just having one or two cookies and being done with it, you're going to eat the whole box of cookies, right? Or, you just go from one extreme to the other. So get used to having smaller, more frequent, free choice indulgences. And this will help to minimize those cravings and keep them under control, so you don't obsess over it, right? Like if you're craving it, have it in moderation, and then get it done and out of your system, and then move on. And there's ways to go on about this. I mean, obviously portion control is the big one, but I'll give you a prime example of how I go about this. Like, especially in the summertime, for example, like sometimes like to go out for ice cream, right? I mean, like, hey, nice summer day, you're out and about, and hey, I want to go to the ice cream shop and have an ice cream. Well, I do that, but now I get the small kid size ice cream, right? So I'm there with my wife and my 6-year-old son. And in the past, it used to be dad got to get the large, mom got to get the medium. And of course, my son had to get the small or the kiddie size, whatever it is. Now we all get kiddie size ice creams, every one of us, right? So it's enough for me to enjoy going out for ice cream, get the taste of ice cream, get that satisfaction, but it's just enough to satisfy the craving, get it out of my system, forget about it, move on. Because what you'll find when it comes to a lot of the junk foods, once you've satisfied the initial craving, you got the taste of it, eating more of it is just more of the same. Like, once you have that first piece of pie, the second piece of pie isn't going to taste any better. It's just more of the same, right? Once you've had one scoop of ice cream, the second scoop isn't going to taste any better. It's just more of the same. So like, you just want to have a little bit, satisfy and indulge it, and then forget about it, move on. And by doing that, it takes the stress out of it. It doesn't feel like you're on a diet or you're restricting yourself, because you're not. You're still enjoying it, but you're just enjoying more responsibly and more sustainably in a way that's going to help to conduce health and fitness over the long term, without feeling like you're restricting yourself or you're depriving, you're not allowed to have it. Because that's what sabotages most people's fat loss, right? Is they always feel like, oh, I'm depriving, I'm not allowed to have it. And this feeling is what sabotages their progress long term. Whereas if you can lose the fat and still eat healthy and not feel like you're on a diet, like it's a win-win all around. And that's what makes it sustainable. So I know that's a long-winded answer to your question there, but hopefully that resonates with you, and you can utilize that to enjoying your holidays and still making progress. All right, moving on. Let us see. We have Pause. Liam, restarting a weight loss phase after this weekend. Have lost about 60 pounds since last year's Thanksgiving. Do you still recommend caffeine and ephedrine like the old days, or any supplements for weight loss? Do I still recommend caffeine and ephedrine? Yeah, I mean, if you have it available, it's legal in your area, and you tolerate it well, you can still use that. I mean, I find that it's still a helpful crutch to help the process along. I don't use it in excess, but I will have caffeine, before workouts, like a pre-workout. And if you tolerate ephedrine well and you have it available, then you can have that. I would recommend using the minimum effective dose when it comes to caffeine and ephedrine. Try and use just enough to get the desired result without trying to go overkill. Because one of the problems with like pre-workouts and caffeine and stimulants in general is people go overkill with it, and it's very easy to build up your tolerance levels, and it just becomes a negative spiral from there. Like, I've seen people get to the point where they're consuming literally 2,000 milligrams of caffeine a day just to get up to maintenance level, just so that they can function to get through the day. Like, that's extreme. Like, that's putting stress on your body, stress on your adrenal glands, and it's just, that's not a healthy place to be. But the minimum effective dose. And in my case, I usually have 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day. That's my caffeine consumption. And if I'm doing that, if I'm having that before a workout, whether it's a cardio workout or a weight training workout, I'll sometimes have some ephedrine along with it. I usually have between 16 to 24 milligrams of ephedrine. And that's, we in Canada, we get these 8 milligram tablets. Back in the day, you used to be able to get 25 milligram tablets. That was kind of the standard. Nowadays, due to like government regulations and stuff, they're only allowed to sell 8 milligram tablets, which I actually like better, because now it allows you to effectively control the dosage more so than the big old chunky 25 milligram tablets that he had, because that's a lot. Like, that's a hefty size dose, right? So now, if you just want a little bit, like 1 or 2, you could have that. Or if you wanted a bit more of a kick in the arse, if you will, then you could have 3, and basically 3 8 milligram tablets, 24 milligrams, kind of similar to the old 25 milligram tabs that we used to get back in the day. But I'll still use that in moderation. I mean, it's not something that I do daily, but if for workouts, when I really want to push myself, or I feel I need an extra kick, then I will have, ephedrine tablets along with it. And as far as the weight loss side of things, it's helpful because both caffeine and ephedrine, they help to increase your energy levels, which is a plus. They temporarily help to suppress your appetite, which is another plus, especially when you're trying to control your caloric intake. And it helps to increase your energy, curb your appetite, and it also helps to the body to tap into burning body fat. It helps to release fatty acids into the bloodstream to be utilized for energy. So, I mean, it can help the process along. Now, it's not going to do the work for you. Like, I mean, you just can't eat like crap and take caffeine and ephedrine and say, oh, this is going to work for me. No, I mean, if you're doing everything right, your diet and your exercise, and you have, the foundation in place, then this is like a little crutch that can help the process along. But you want to be, what I'm trying to say here is, you want to be aware of you and your individual tolerance levels, because this is a very individualized thing. Like, I know some people, if they have a cup of coffee, they're shaking like a leaf, jitters, and it's just too much. And then other people, they could probably drink a pot of coffee a day and then fall asleep and have a nap. We all have our own individual tolerances. And ephedrine is the same idea. Like, some people can't tolerate it at all. Some people can. So, use your own discretion when it comes to this. But either way, even if you do tolerate it well, I still would recommend being on the conservative side and using it as little as possible while still getting the desired result. This is one of those areas where more is not better, put it that way. All right, moving on to Gabriel. Says, I'm tuning in from Germany, 11 p.m. here. Well, good. It's almost Christmas Eve for you. When and what kind of cardio should I do if I have no bike and I start my day with a whey, creatine, and beta alanine? Shall I drink my shake before or after? What kind of cardio should you do? You have no bike. You can do whatever. I mean, like you could go for a walk. You could go to the gym and do cardio machines there. If you live close to a swimming pool and you enjoy swimming, you can go swimming. I mean, there's all kinds of cardio that you can do. Anything that gets your ass moving and keeps it moving is considered cardio, right? Like anything that you're doing consistently, you're moving and you're working up a sweat, that's cardio. I would recommend getting a bike if you do enjoy biking, because it's a hell of a lot of fun. But I mean, for me, before I got into cycling, and especially like when I was competing in bodybuilding, I did a lot of cardio in form of walking. That was probably my top form. And I would recommend getting some form of cardio for your home, like whether it is a stationary bike or a treadmill or a stepper or something. Having some form of cardio at home is very convenient and practical, especially as we're moving into the winter and you're probably not going to be getting outside as much. Well, so having some form of home cardio is a huge asset. And for me, for years, I had an elliptical machine set up in my rec room in front of the television. And I did a lot of cardio on that elliptical machine, getting ready for bodybuilding shows. And it was very convenient because it's there, it's in your house. You know, if I wanted to watch a show or a movie or something like that, I could, you know, I would do it. I would watch it while doing cardio. So it's a great way to make the excuse to get it done, right? Like, let's say there's a particular show on Netflix or whatever that you really want to watch. Hey, you're only allowed to binge watch that show while you're doing cardio, right? So you can kind of set these little rules, and it actually makes it easier to get in some extra cardio. And I found that very helpful. So, I mean, I did that for years, and I actually used my elliptical so much that I snapped the axle off in the middle, right? Like the main axle that was in the wheel of the elliptical that the pedals ran on. Was last year I was using it and I was doing my cardio, and then all of a sudden, clunk, right? The whole leg just fell off the side of the elliptical. And when I looked in there, I had put that many miles on it. The axle just literally snapped, right? You could just see the stress in the axle, and it twisted and snapped right off. And that's a big axle, like probably a 1-inch bar, right? Like it's going through there that just snapped right clean off. So I put a lot of miles on it. That elliptical. When did I buy that? I got it in 2003, and it snapped off in 2021. So it had a lot of years and a lot of miles on it. So I got my money's worth out of it, put it that way. But it was one of those cardio machines that just wasn't a dust collector. It actually got used. So I would highly recommend that for anybody who wants to prioritize their fitness. I think you should have some form of cardio at home just to make it easier, to reduce the friction of doing it. Because if you have to go to the gym to get in some cardio, it just increases that friction of getting it done. Whereas if it's there in your house, it's so much easier, especially in the wintertime, when you're probably not getting outside as much. But as far as the types of cardio, one is not really any better than another. Like you can get your heart rate elevated with all kinds of cardio. I mean, as far as my personal favorites, I love cycling. I mean, that's my number one favorite, because I do like getting outside and just the fun and the adventure of cycling. But I also do stationary cycling inside. And when I'm at the gym, I'll use the treadmill, the rower, the elliptical. I also have a rowing machine at home as well. So once that elliptical broke, I replaced it with a rowing machine. And I like that. That's another nice form of non-impact cardio. And the thing I like about the rower is it's total body. You're engaging your upper as well as your lower body. So it's a nice change of pace versus most cardio machines, which are just lower body dominant. So I like that. But the most important thing is just the consistency. And as far as whether or not you have a protein shake before or after, it's up to you, right? I mean, like, if you like doing cardio on an empty stomach, then by all means do it. But if you prefer to have something in you beforehand, then you can do that as well. And the way I go about it, if I'm doing a short cardio session, and by my standards, a short cardio session is an hour or less, right? I know everybody has their own standards of what long or short is, but for me, short is an hour or less. And I'm doing it first thing in the morning. Very often I'll just have a cup of coffee and do the cardio, get it done, and then I'll have my breakfast afterwards. if I'm doing a longer session, like I'm going out for a bike ride that's going to take a couple hours or more, or it's, maybe it's a big weekend ride where we're going to, go for several hours, I'm eating beforehand, right? If it's a long session, I'm eating beforehand because I need the fuel in my system in order to get through that multi-hour session. But if it's short, like half hour to an hour, very often I'll do it on an empty stomach. And it's really personal preference. I mean, like you could argue both ways whether it works or not, but the most important thing is that you do it consistently, right? That's the most important thing. But again, hopefully that helps. And moving on, let us see. Or a sip of coffee, wet the whistle. Robert says it's very cold right now. That will change in the next few days. All right. It is. We're having a warm streak too, or we're going to have one. Like right now, today in where I live, it's below freezing, but tomorrow it's going to warm up and rain. So yeah, you're probably in a similar weather pattern. It's going to be a green Christmas. Let us see what else we got there. Eddie's joining in, saying going to be a rainy Christmas in Ireland. Lee Dunnigan's joining in, regular to our video chats, saying any tips for staying on top of nutrition while feeling ill? I've had a heavy cold for 10 days now, and my regular healthy eating habits seem harder to follow at the moment. Yeah, I can appreciate that. Anytime you're not feeling yourself, you're not feeling well, it throws off your entire routine. Obviously, exercise is going to suffer, whether you're doing it at all or you're just bare minimum. And of course, your appetite can be out of whack, right? Like sometimes when you're sick, you don't have any appetite. Sometimes you may have an appetite, but it's not always for the healthiest foods. Sometimes you desire some comfort food, to make you feel better in the moment when you're not feeling well. That's a really challenging thing to focus on, but the big thing that I would focus on in that situation is just trying to, one, keep yourself hydrated and kind of just listen to your body. Like if you're not feeling hungry, don't force it, right? Like listen to your body. I mean, your body is very smart in telling you when it needs food, when it not, and when it doesn't. And sometimes even going through a phase of lower calories can actually help with the healing process, right? You'll see that sometimes, like almost like a detox and a relief to the digestive system, because it's less work that your body has to do if you're not digesting and breaking down food all the time. So if you're normally eating a high calorie eating plan and you're normally doing high intensity workouts and stuff, and you're just running, high intensity, high calories, and you're pushing the limits, and now you're feeling ill, then hey, just dial it back, right? Like dial back the food intake and don't feel stressed like, oh shit, I didn't get a gram of protein per pound of body weight today, or like just eat until you're comfortably full. One thing I would make sure, make sure you're getting the hydration in there, also getting the electrolytes in there as well. But I wouldn't force it. Seriously, like don't add more stress on top of an already stressed body when you're feeling ill. Just kind of like ride it out, let your body rest and recover. And then when you are feeling better, then gradually build back into your old routine. And the big thing is when you're coming back off stuff like this, like for a setback of feeling ill, you're not going to just bounce back into your old routine again. Like you got to start back off literally like a beginner. Like for your first week back to the gym, when you do go back, like just literally go through the motions with easy workouts, no heavy lifting, no trying to set personal records or nothing. You're just literally going through the motions, getting your body back into the routine again, and then just focus on being better than you were before. And then within a few weeks, you'll be back to normal and then hopefully hitting some new personal records again. But don't stress over it. Like it's unfortunate, but it's shit that happens to everybody. We're all going to get sick and have some setbacks from time to time. It's just, ride it out and let it happen. Merry Christmas from Mark. And he says, any tips on maintaining weight after doing a cut? I've kind of been sharing some of those along the way. I don't recommend doing a cut unless it's for a short-term extreme situation. And very often when you do a cut, like let's say you're doing a bodybuilding show and you're you want to get in peak condition, or you're doing a photo shoot or something short term that you want to get in peak condition for, you got to realize you can't sustain peak, right? And I'm speaking from experience. Like I've been competing in bodybuilding since 1995, done multiple shows, and I done what is this? 14 competitions myself, and I've trained and coached numerous people along the way over the years. And nobody can sustain peak levels of conditioning. Like Mr. Olympia doesn't maintain a peak level of conditioning. So the idea of trying to maintain, you can't, right? You can't like get super shredded and then maintain that. You know, it's like I mentioned earlier, like the dial, like you can dial it up and hit your peak, but then you got to dial it back to something that's more sustainable. And the problem with a lot of people is they have this all or nothing, right? I talk about this a lot because it's so common, right? It's so common in not only in fitness, but in so many areas of life, whereas people like, that's it, I'm all in 100%, go big, go hard, go home. And you know, if they're not all in, then it's like, screw it, I'm not doing anything. Right? What's the point of even trying if I'm not all in? And you got to like let go of that and just realize I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be extreme. I just got to try and be better than I was before and focus on progress over perfection, right? There's good enough, but good enough consistently. And if you can be good enough and good enough consistently, like that's where sustainability is. So the big one with trying to maintain as much of your conditioning as possible after an extreme cutting phase is you want to still focus on the same core habits, but just put yourself into a calorie maintenance and not a deficit. So the same types of foods that you were eating to lose the fat, you still want to eat those afterwards, right? Like just eat more of them so that now you're no longer in a deficit. And very often, like my eating habits don't drastically change much from a contest cutting phase, if you will, to my day-to-day. I mean, yes, they will change a bit, but it's subtle changes. And the biggest change is literally the portion sizes. But it's also like some of these needless calories. Like a lot of the core foods stay the same, but when I'm dialing it up to get in peak condition, it's just being extra strict. Like a prime example, like every day I always have a staple for my meals. I always have a large garden salad. But when I'm on when I competed last year, when I made my comeback to the Masters bodybuilding competition, I still had my large garden salad, but I had that large garden salad without salad dressing, right? So that was one thing that I cut out just to kind of scale back the calories, but still get the food volume. So cut out the salad dressing, and, you know, to add some flavor to the salad, I would put like some salt and pepper and dry spices on it. I probably put in a little bit of fat-free Greek yogurt, like to give it a little bit of a creamy texture, but I wouldn't put any salad dressing because that was just empty calories. You know, there's basically fat and sugar. Like there's no nutritional value in salad dressing. So I cut that out. Other things like, you know, sauces and seasonings and things like that, be very selective, like choose low calorie options there. Like I wouldn't put barbecue sauce on a chicken breast, you know, I'd choose like a sugar-free barbecue sauce instead, or, you know, just being very mindful and selective, and then scaling back, you know, portion sizes. So I'm still eating the same types of foods, but just smaller portions of them. And those little subtle changes, along with bumping up the activity level, was enough to allow me to create that calorie deficit to tap into burning stored body fat and to get in peak condition. But the problem with that is when you sustain a calorie deficit for a prolonged period of time, you deplete your glycogen stores, you deplete your energy levels, and it's not sustainable because you always feel like you're running on empty. And you're, you know, as you're getting closer to peak condition, you literally are running on empty. You're running on willpower at that stage, you know, in order to hit that conditioning. But then when you finish whatever it is that you were cutting for, and now you want to kind of scale it back, dial it back, just bump up the calories. You know, and if you want to add in a little bit of more enjoyment to your food, like, okay, now I put some salad dressing back on my salads again, right? You know, like most people wouldn't consider that, you know, their cheat. Oh, wow, you're cheating because you put salad dressing on your salad. But like that was one of the changes I made. And I mean, it was a significant one. It actually made a noticeable difference. But like little things like that, I mean, just bump up the calories a little bit more, but still eating the same core foods, but just more of them. And now you're in a calorie maintenance and not a calorie deficit. And by doing that, you'll refuel your glycogen stores and you'll just feel better and have more energy and be able to think straight and clear and not feel like you're going hungry. And as long as you don't feel like you're hungry, you should be able to sustain it. That's the big one. It's just eating enough of that high nutrient dense foods so that you can enjoy the process and not feel like you're on a diet. But the biggest mistake that you definitely want to avoid is this, cut and then, just eat whatever the hell you want, which I've been guilty of. And I know so many people have been guilty of that, right? Like you go from boiled chicken and broccoli one day to like, all right, pizza and ice cream and Doritos the next day. Like, no, that you ain't going to maintain anything doing that. You're just going to balloon up and rebound weight gain galore. All right, moving on. Got Bobby's joining in. Welcome, Bobby. Real talk. Appreciate it. Thank you much. Sonny is joining in. He says, if I miss my protein intake by 50 grams, then weight drops the next day by a fair bit, say 1.5 kilograms. Is any muscle lost if I miss my protein intake for a day? First off, your weight is always going to be fluctuating up and down. It's a lot of people who don't weigh themselves frequently are not aware of this. They step on the scale and the scale says, hey, I'm 200 pounds or I'm 90 kilograms or whatever you're using, right? You weigh yourself and a lot of people think, oh, well, that's what I weigh, right? I stepped on the scale and it says I'm X weight. Well, that's what I weigh. That's what you weighed at that exact moment you stepped on the scale, right? You go step on that scale an hour later, the weight could be higher or lower depending on what you did over the last hour. Like I actually made a video about this where I weighed myself and then I went for a bike ride and I came back and I had lost, I lost 3 pounds because I went for a bike ride. Like, and then once I ate and drank and fueled up afterwards, I put that 3 pounds back on again. So like your weight is going up and down all day long. It's never static. So the fact that you lose, or you say you lost 1.5 kilograms, your weight is always going up and down by that much. And it may or may not be related to, your protein intake. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously if you eat less food and your weight could drop because of that, but you realize that your weight is constantly fluctuating all the time. And if you're not aware of this, I encourage you, like, try it. Like, weigh yourself first thing in the morning when you wake up. Weigh yourself midday. Weigh yourself last thing before you go to bed. Like, just throughout the day, randomly weigh yourself. And don't get emotionally attached to the number. Just look at it almost like a scientist who's looking at research data and just say, wow, isn't that interesting how my weight fluctuates, right? I was 200 pounds in the morning, and by midday, I was 203. By night, I was 205. The next morning, I woke up and I was 199. Like, what the hell? My weight's just up and down, up and down. And it's always going up and down, right? Depending on your food, your exercise, your hydration, all this stuff. Like it's always fluctuating up and down. So don't get emotionally attached to it. I mean, if you eat more, chances are you're probably going to weigh more. If you eat less, chances are you're going to weigh less. So that's normal. And it doesn't always mean muscle loss, right? There's more to it than that. It's usually water and glycogen. That's what's the biggest variable is water weight and glycogen weight when your weight fluctuates quickly, and just intestinal bloat and everything else, right? Like if you got a bad case of the diarrhea and, and you don't eat much and you kind of like empty out the system, then obviously, yeah, you're going to lose weight, right? If anyone's ever had a colonoscopy and you had to go through that whole cleanse process and, to do that, that's not a fun topic, but it's, I mean, you're going to lose weight from that because you're just like, you're emptying the pipes, you're emptying the gunk from the trunk, if you will, right? And then you're going to lose weight because of that. But then as soon as you start eating normally again, you're going to gain it all back. So it's not actual muscle and fat that's fluctuating in the short term. It's usually just water, intestinal bloat, and glycogen. Long-term changes, when you see your weight, your average weight changing over the long term, that could be muscle changes or body fat changes in real world composition. But the short-term fluctuations, like, don't stress over it. Like, look at the long-term trend. It's almost like if you're investing in the stock market, like, you don't stress out over the day-to-day fluctuations and the little temporary blips and spikes and lows on the charts. You want to look at the long-term trend. Like, where is it heading over the long term? That's where you make your big decisions from, not based on the little day-to-day fluctuations. All right, look at the long-term trend, and the same applies with your fitness and fat loss goals. Look at the long-term trend where it's heading, and don't get hung up on the day-to-day fluctuations. Da, 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 da. Any tips to tighten loose skin in the lower belly naturally? Keep keep the fat off and keep losing weight. A lot of times when people have loose skin, it just means that they still have more to lose, right? Like that often happens. So I mean the you continue to lose fat and you continue to keep that fat off, it's going to tighten up as much as it will naturally over time. Now it's not instantaneous. It's not like, hey, you lose fat and then you're super lean, tight, ripped skin and all that. No, I mean, it's going to take some time, but the skin does have natural elasticity and it will tighten up over time. Now, depending on how much excess weight you carried and your just natural elasticity in your skin, this is going to vary from person to person. Like I know some people who've lost a significant amount of weight and have no loose skin. I know some people who've lost a significant amount of weight and have a lot of loose skin, right? So it's an individual thing. It's not like it's a one size fits all solution here. But generally speaking, if you want to, have it tighten up naturally without resorting to, tummy tucks and surgical removal of skin and all that kind of stuff, the number one thing is just to keep losing fat and to maintain it, right? Try not to get into that yo-yo dieting up and down, rebound weight gain, because that's just going to cause it to re-stretch again. So get lean and then stay lean and then let it tighten up naturally on its own. And it will tighten up as much as it can. I mean, like if you've kept it off for several years, it's pretty much, it's going to be what it is. But if it's problematic, then you can look into options, right? And I know some people who have. I mean, it all depends on your situation, your comfort zone, and what's, if it's really bothersome. I actually made a video talking about loose skin. If you want, you can just go search on YouTube for Lee Hayward loose skin and you should find it. I can't remember the exact title of the video off the top of my head, but if you just do a search for Lee Hayward loose skin, you'll see it. And I actually share, because I mean, I have some loose skin after I've lost weight because, I've went through bouts of yo-yo dieting and I've been through, much heavier than I am right now. And I have some loose skin, but it's not significant. I mean, it's there. If I draw attention to it, like I do in the video, yeah, okay, it's there. But in a normal situation, like, I can still go to the beach or go on vacation and like nobody's really going to notice it. And it's not going to have like any negative impact. It's not problematic enough that I'm going to do anything about it. But, in some cases, people literally have like folds of loose skin and it may be, an issue that they actually want to get corrected surgically. And ultimately, if you do have excessive amounts of loose skin, the only way to truly fix it is through surgically removing it, right? It's not just going to magically disappear on its own. Here's an interesting question from Loho. Your top 5 bodybuilders from the 90s. This was back when I was a bodybuilding fan back in the 90s, because that's when I started competing and training. Like I started seriously working out, actually following a structured workout program in 1990. Before then, I was just dabbling with weights at home because my dad had the York cement-filled weights in our basement. And I mean, I dabbled and, did curls and, push-ups and bench presses and whatever, the show-off muscles, right? The curls and bench presses with the York cement-filled barbell set. But in 1990, that was the year that I said, I'm going to get serious about this. And I actually asked my parents for a home gym for Christmas that year. And we built onto that, and gradually acquired more and more equipment and turned our whole basement into a home gym setup. But then it all started, as actually following a structured program for me in 1990. And then I started competing in bodybuilding in 95. And so that was when I was really the bodybuilding fan. I was always going to the, every month had to buy the latest bodybuilding magazines and stuff like that. So I was really a fan back then. Not so much anymore. Like I haven't bought a bodybuilding magazine and I can't remember when. Like literally, I cannot remember when I bought a bodybuilding magazine. And so I'm not a huge fan of it. Like I just found out that the Mr. Olympia was just recently. And I mean, I don't even know the top competitors anymore who are competing. So I have to admit, I'm not a bodybuilding fan anymore, right? I'm more of a health and wellness and lifestyle approach fan. But as far as competitive bodybuilding, it's not a huge interest to me now. But back in the day, back in the 90s, it was. And as far as my favorites at the time, I was a huge fan of Dorian Yates. And the thing that I liked about Dorian Yates was his mindset and his approach to bodybuilding, just that serious, no BS, get shit done type of attitude. I just really respected that. And I used to love watching I had his VHS tape, the Blood and Guts one. And used to read all the articles that were published about him in the magazines and stuff. So he was obviously one of my top favorites. Who else that really stood out in my mind? I mean, of course, you had Kevin Levrone. There was another one. He was a Flex Wheeler. Lee Labrada. I like Lee Labrada too, because I could relate to him because he was like the shorter bodybuilder, but he was still really competitive against some of the bigger guys. Who else was really stood out? Trying to think now. I mean, like, I admired a lot of them, but there wasn't really any one person that I was like a hardcore fan over. But like, I mean, I admired all the bodybuilders back then. But I mean, some of that really stood out in my mind. Obviously, Dorian, former Mr. Olympia. I mean, Flex Wheeler, and then Lee Labrada, Sean Ray, Kevin Levrone, Vince Taylor. Chris Cormier was, another top guy back in the day. Porter Cottrell, Mike Francois. A lot of those guys back in that era. I mean, like, I just read about them in the magazines, and I was just kind of like a general fan of all of them. And I remember the first time I went to the Arnold Classic was in 2007, and I was like, then I was like, holy shit! Like, first time I was ever to a bodybuilding expo, and actually got to meet a lot of these people in person and see them, and they're like, wow, they're real guys, like, hey, the magazine came to life, and I thought that was cool. But like saying, I was a big bodybuilding fan back in the day, but honestly, nowadays I don't even follow it anymore. I really don't. The only bodybuilding information I get now is what pops up on my social media feed on Facebook when someone's sharing something. But so be it. That's the way it is, right? I've moved on to other areas of fitness, and it just goes to show, like, bodybuilding for most people is not the competitive side anymore. It's literally building your body. Like, that's what true bodybuilding is, and that's what I'm more of a fan of the health and wellness side of it, not the competitive side. Because just to put it out there, there's nothing healthy about competitive bodybuilding. Like, no, it's not a sport of health. It's a sport of extremes, right? This is health and wellness is the far from it, because when those guys are in peak shape on stage, they are the furthest from health that they'll ever be at that stage. So if you're looking for health and wellness, competitive bodybuilding ain't it. All right, moving on. Let's see what else we got there. Mr. Lee, you know your deeds, and for that, my hat's off. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That's the Fire Dum Cum. Fire Dum Cum. I think I said that right. Thanks for the comments. Neil's joining in. Says, what are your thoughts about mastering mind-muscle connection first before bumping up the weights? I find it hard to do this on the left portion of my back. I'm a big fan of trying to get that mind-muscle connection, or at least mastering the exercise form before worrying about weights. Go through the motions, learn to perform the exercises, try and feel the muscle that you're working, but don't stress over it, because this is something that you'll develop with time. And I'm just going to share some of my personal experiences from back in the day. When I was in my teenage years and early on in my journey, certain exercises, like, I knew they were good exercises and I would do them, and I would try to do them to the best of my ability, but I didn't feel the muscle working, especially in my back. The back is a hard area to feel. So a lot of times I was just kind of going through the motions with it. And what you'll find is, as you build more muscle, it's going to be easier to develop that mind-muscle connection. It's almost like a catch-22, right? In order to build muscle, you have to have the mind-muscle connection. But in order to have the mind-muscle connection, you have to have some muscle there to begin with. So if you're trying to flex a small undeveloped muscle, it's hard to get that connection, hard to get that feeling there. But realize that as that muscle builds and as you get more comfortable with it, it's going to be easier to have that mind-muscle connection. But the first thing that you want to focus on is trying to master proper exercise form, controlling the weights, not just swinging and heaving and using momentum, but actually doing a muscular contraction. And this is challenging because by default, people don't do this. Like if you lift something in the real world, you're going to try and do it in the easiest, most efficient way that you know how to do. Like you're not going to do it slow and controlled. Like I'll give you an example. Like if you're pulling over a lawnmower, like nobody pulls over a lawnmower slow and controlled. Like that's like a natural rowing movement, if you will, in the real world. But if you try to pull over a lawnmower slow and controlled, it ain't going to start because you're not going to get enough RPMs through the motor to fire it up. So you got to be fast and jerky and explosive just to get that thing to pull over. But if you apply that to your weight training, you're not getting maximum muscle contraction, right? If you just heave and jerk the weights, like you heave and swing the barbells and dumbbells, and you're using leg drive and momentum. Yes, you're moving the weight, but you're not getting maximum muscle contraction. So you need to kind of differentiate it and focus on actually slowing it down, being able to control the weight through all the different portions of the range of motion. And a good little cue to use, especially when you're learning a new exercise, is like you should be able to pause that movement anywhere in the repetition. So like, for example, if you're doing a row, like as you're rowing the weight, like you should be able to pause it and hold that peak contraction at the top. If you can't, then you're just using momentum to heave and jerk the weight up. Right. So you should be able to control it throughout the entire range of motion. And if you approach your exercises with that mentality and that kind of control, over time, you are going to build more of a mind-muscle connection, and it's also going to help you to develop the muscles. Now, you still want to increase the weights, don't get me wrong, but do so when you can do it with good form, right? And if you get to the point where your form is breaking down, then you might want to do a reset. And this is something that I've gone through many phases of throughout my training, and I think everybody who's at a certain level of development has been at this for years. You'll find the same thing. You'll probably be teetering back and forth between good form and borderline sloppy form as you're trying to train in a progressive overload fashion. So like if you start off, you go really light, going through the motions. Yeah, the weights are light, the form is good. You're getting that mind-muscle connection. You're in control of the weights, slow control tempo. But then as you start building up the weight, you're adding 5 pounds here, 5 pounds there. And, over time, you're starting to increase the weight. Eventually, as that weight gets heavier, now you got to use a little bit more oomph, a little bit more momentum, a little bit more body English, if you will, to complete the repetitions. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like there's a range here. It's not like all or nothing. There's we want to focus on the in-between, that range, if you will, almost like a dial, as I've been mentioning earlier. So as you start to dial up the weight, you might have to loosen up the form a little bit. But then it's going to start to get to the point where now you're not in total control. You are heaving and jerking, and you don't have the ability to pause and control the repetition mid-form or, in the middle of the rep. And so once you get to the point where you got to be honest with yourself, you know what? My form is breaking down. I actually need to lighten the weight a little bit. And then you can drop the weight by 10 or 20% and then start the process again. Really focus on tightening up the form, slow and controlled, then gradually build up the weight. And then when you get to the point where, okay, the weight's heavy enough now that my form is starting to break down again, maybe you want to dial it back, tighten up the form, and kind of go through that, almost like working in a range. But try to stay within the limits of not going to the point where your form is just utter shit. And I'm sure you've seen people in the gym whose form is utter shit, where they're like, their bicep curls are reverse grip power cleans. And they're heaving and jerking the weight whenever they're doing a row, and they're bench pressing with their ass 8 inches off the bench and bouncing it off their chest and just doing whatever they can to just move the weight. You don't go to that. Like if you got to use a little bit of a swing or something, okay, that's not too bad. But when it gets to the point where it's ridiculous, you got to dial it back. Like try not to get to that point where it's ridiculous, but if you are, but dial it back, because you want to stay in that sweet spot of controlled form, a little tiny bit of controlled cheating, but not getting to the point where your form is just outrageous. Because when you start pushing the limits with that, not only is it not advantageous from a muscle stimulation point of view, but it's opening up the door to injury. And the worst thing that's going to happen is getting injured. So, you really want to just focus on mastering the form first and then building up the weights after. And let go of the ego. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, nobody in the gym gives a shit how much you're lifting. They really don't. I know intellectually you're thinking, oh, I got to keep up with people, or if I lift light weights, people are going to look down on me, or nobody cares. Seriously, everybody's too busy. They're caught up in their own mind, or they're caught up scrolling on their phone in between sets. Like, nobody gives a shit what you're doing. They're stuck. They're too worried about what they're doing to care about what you're doing. So don't have this ego thinking like, oh, I got to lift a certain weight, or people are going to think I'm a pussy or whatever. Like, nobody cares. Like, so do your thing. All right, we're gone over an hour, and I'm almost out of coffee. I am out of coffee. There we go. I told you that was my barometer and my timer. When I said at the start of the chat, I do this for an hour-ish. Well, the ish is up. We've been going for an hour-ish. Let's see. I know there's probably a bunch more questions coming through, but I'm going to get ready to clue it up because, hey, it's Christmas. I got to get ready for Santa Claus, and I know the rest of you do as well. All right. Hopefully I've been a good boy this year, and Santa will be coming to visit the Haywards. Just going to have a quick scan through the chats and see if there's any other questions coming through. Thank you. This is Neil saying, thank you very much. Merry Christmas in advance. Although I was expecting you to wear a Santa hat for the stream, bring Holly spirit. I know. I forgot my Santa hat. I wear the Santa hat sometimes, like for pictures or whatever, but it's too warm. I'm not a hat person, right? Especially in the house. But yeah, I should have wore it at least started the chat with a Santa hat. Oh well. Sonny saying, thanks, appreciate you taking time to answer my questions. Answer the questions. Have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Same to you, my friend. Thank you so much. Glad you appreciate it. And again, I do this for you guys. I mean, I enjoy doing it, but I mean, ultimately, this is to help you. So, I mean, if you're getting benefit from it, more power. I mean, that's what it's all about. Patrick, I think it is, or Pratik. Anyway, never seen that name before. Anyways, question is, when I start taking creatine, my face looks bloated and swelled, which I don't like. Is there anything that can be taken on side with creatine to avoid the face being bloated? I've never really had any issues with water retention or bloating like that. But one thing I would look into with that is how much creatine are you taking? If you're doing the loading phase, that could probably be causing you to feel bloated. And I'll just finish off with this and then we'll clue it up. I was actually having a coaching conversation today with one of my coaching students, Richard, who he was asking about creatine and how to go about it and everything else. First off, the loading phase with creatine is overrated, and the idea behind it is just to saturate your body with creatine as fast as possible, so that you get the most bang for your buck, if you will, right away. But there's no need of that. It's okay to start off with the maintenance phase, which is approximately 5 grams of creatine per day. I mean, you could even go less than that if you wanted. Like, you could have 3 grams a day or whatever. But start off small and then let it build up into your system gradually over time. There's no need to go boatload and like 30 grams of creatine per day right from the start. So you go from 0 to like 30 grams a day, because in that shock to the system, it could cause bloating and water retention and upset stomach and all these negative undesired side effects. Whereas if you start small, start with the maintenance dose, your body gets the chance to adapt and build up to it without, upset stomach and excess water retention or anything else. And then over the course of a few weeks, it'll build up to the point where you saturate your cells with creatine and you're getting the benefits that creatine has to offer without the drawbacks. So you're building up to it gradually. And this is a much easier and more comfortable way of going about it. And then a few weeks down the road, you still have, your creatine levels are topped up and you're reaping the benefits that creatine has to offer. So if you're experiencing that bloating and swelling and all that, chances are you probably did the loading phase, right? Because you mentioned you started taking it and then you get bloated. And if you're starting it and you're doing that loading BS that, that people recommend, that's probably where it's coming from. And the idea behind that loading phase, it's kind of a marketing hype too, because when creatine hit the market, the big thing was like, oh, this is a lean mass gainer. people are gaining 10 pounds in a week taking creatine. Like, so guys are like, holy shit, I want to get big. I'm going to gain 10 pounds. I'm going to put 50 pounds on my bench. I'm going to be huge and jacked, right? And then the idea was you load it into your system and go like from 0 to hero overnight. And that's, yeah, sure. When you do it, you may get some fast results if you can tolerate and absorb it and everything else. But it also, that's where a lot of the drawbacks come from. Whereas if you do it in a slower, more gradual progression and let it build up slowly over the course of several weeks, you still ultimately get the same results without the drawbacks. So that's what I would recommend. Try taking it smaller doses. And I mean, even if the 5 grams is too much, hey, try taking the small, like take 3 grams of creatine a day or something like that, and just see how you tolerate it. And if that should work, that should allow you to utilize it and get the benefits from it without the bloating and all that. And then if you're still getting the bloating and stuff from small doses of creatine, then scrap it all together. I mean, it's not a must-have supplement. It can help, and it's beneficial to most people who take it, but it's not for everybody. Like, some people either don't get any benefit from it at all, or for some reason it just doesn't sit well with their system. And if that's the case, then it's okay not to use creatine. You don't have to do it, right? Like, creatine is a relatively new supplement in the bodybuilding world. Like, it only came out around like in the early 90s. That's when creatine kind of went mainstream. But like, you think of all the bodybuilders back in the day, like back in the pumping iron days, in the 60s and 70s, and the Muscle Beach days, they weren't using creatine. Like, it wasn't available as a supplement back then, and they still got amazing physiques. And in fact, the physiques that the guys had in the quote unquote pumping iron days are what most people would admire to have today. So if they were able to achieve it without creatine, then you're able to achieve it without creatine as well if you do the right things. So it's not a must-have supplement, right? It's a nice to have supplement, but if it doesn't fit for you, or you don't tolerate it well, then don't stress over it. You don't need it. All right, Crispin's joining in as well, saying Merry Christmas to you and your family. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. And Patrick's saying, thanks, that was very helpful. Good, glad you enjoyed it. All right, guys, I'm going to clue it up. So hopefully you enjoy the video chat, and I'm going to clue this up and just let you know the replay of this will be posted up within a couple days. I'll have the timestamps for all our questions that we discussed. And in the meantime, have yourself a very Merry Christmas, and enjoy the festives and the seasons. And again, if you're just catching this chat on the tail end of it, go back and watch the replay, because I did post some healthy suggestions on how you can enjoy your Christmas without making a pig of yourself and blowing your diet in the process. Some practical, real-world strategies on how you can enjoy the holidays and still make progress with your fitness and fat loss goals. All right, guys, have yourself a good one, and I will talk to you in our next one. Take care. Over and out.